I'll call to order this meeting of the Salem City Council for Monday, December 2nd, 2024. If the recorder will please call the roll.
Councillor Stapleton?
I'm here.
Councillor Nishioka?
Here.
Councillor Phillips?
Here.
Councillor Gwynn?
Here.
Councillor Gonzalez?
Here.
Councillor Hoy?
Here.
Councillor Nordyke? Absent. Councillor Varney?
Here.
Mayor Hoy?
Here, if you'll join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Councillor Nishioka, do we have any additions or deletions?
Yes, I move to approve the deletion of 5B to the agenda.
Second.
And we also have a presentation added on a 5A. So maybe, do we need another motion? It's fine as we
So,
Mr. Atchison says we're good to go. Sorry.
Should we restate the motion? Or?
No, we're just approving the deletion of 5B from the agenda. Oh, and by the way, we do have a new report on 5A. Any further discussion?
and oh, by the way, we have a new report on 5A.
Will the recorder please call the roll?
Councillor Gonzalez?
Yeah. Aye.
Councillor Hoy?
Aye.
Councillor Nordyke? Absent. Councillor Varney?
Aye.
Councillor Stapleton?
Aye.
Councillor Nishioka?
Aye.
Councillor Phillips?
Aye.
Councillor Gwynn?
Aye.
Mayor Hoy?
Aye. Motion passes. All right. It is now time for council and city manager comments. I'm going to start this evening. I want to start just by wishing our city manager a very happy birthday today. Today is his birthday. And then the next thing I'm going to say, you can't respond because I've committed to making no public event out of this, so you just have to smile and nod at my words. And I would just like to take a moment to thank Ruthie Stellmacher, our city recorder, for her 24 years of service to the city. This is her last city council meeting. So thank you, Ruthie. No public displays, none. Thank you. Thank you for 24 years of public service. All right. Do we have any other comments? Okay, we are getting out of here by 7, people. You mark my words. I can see it coming. We are on to proclamations. And I would like to invite up, in honor of Human Rights Day 2024, I'd like to invite up our Vice Chair of our Human Rights Commission, Robert Marshall, and also Kelsey Murray, a member of our Human Rights Commission. All right. Whereas December 10th, 2024 marks the 76th anniversary of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the General Assembly of the United Nations, and whereas the preamble of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states, disregard and contempt for human rights have resulted in barbarous acts which have outraged the conscience of mankind, and the advent of a world in which human beings shall enjoy freedom of speech and belief and freedom from fear and want has been proclaimed as the highest aspiration of the common people. And whereas, as mayor and as a member of this community, I share in the community's concern as we see our fellow human beings suffer inequity and discrimination. And we work alongside each of you in standing up against bigotry and taking action in support of human rights. And whereas the city of Salem, by definition, the city of peace, supports freedom for all its people and recognizes the need to address issues of racism, poverty, homelessness, discrimination based on religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, and more, while knowing that in our global society, no person is free until all persons are free. And now, therefore, I, Chris Hoy, Mayor of the City of Salem, Oregon, do hereby proclaim December 10th, 2024 as Human Rights Day in Salem, and urge all in the community to respect this day as a stepping stone to equity and inclusion for all people of our city, our nation, and of the world. Dated the 2nd day of December 2024.
I would like to, yes. If you want to hold on to that.
Yeah, I did prepare some words. I'm going to probably read them mostly from my phone so I don't forget anything. But Mayor, thank you, Council President Nishioka, councilors, and staff for issuing this important proclamation. I'm honored to be joined by fellow Commissioner Kelsey Murray to share a few words about Salem Speaks Up. Salem Speaks Up is an annual event that amplifies community voices in celebration of Human Rights Day. Salem Speaks Up will take place on December 10th from 6 to 8 p.m. at Laux Auditorium with doors opening at 5:30. The event provides an open mic platform for where Salemites can share their experiences, concerns, and insights about human rights issues in our city. It's an opportunity for community members and leaders to listen, learn, and identify areas for meaningful change. This year we will focus on the critical issues of housing discrimination, instability, and homelessness. We extend our heartfelt gratitude to this council for your ongoing efforts to address these issues by expanding housing resources, combating discrimination, and investing in homeless services. These initiatives are vital to building a more equitable and inclusive Salem. As we look ahead, we hope this council and future leaders will continue to center their voice of our most vulnerable community members as you work through the fiscal year 2026 budget and beyond. To my fellow Salemites, when faced with the decision to cut these essential services or double down on this critical work, I hope you'll go all in. Investing in our community's well-being is not just a moral imperative, it's a foundation for a thriving, equitable Salem. As the state's capital city, let's raise the bar when it comes to housing solutions and homeless response systems, not lower it. We encourage everyone to attend Salem Speaks Up next week and share their stories because every voice matters and every action taken today shapes the future we leave for generations to come. Together we can ensure that no one is left behind and that Salem remains a city where dignity, compassion, and opportunity are within reach for all and everyone has an equal opportunity to participate fully in the life of the city. Thank you so much for issuing the proclamation.
All right, we have no presentations. We're on to public comment. We have one person signed up to talk about our agenda item of the proclamation. So that's Lori Walker. She's headed to the microphone now. If you'll hit that button for me, introduce yourself with either your address or your ward. You have 3 minutes. When the yellow light starts to blink, you have 1 minute left. When the red light comes on, that means your time's up. Hey, Lori.
Hi, I'm Lori Walker. I'm here speaking on behalf of myself tonight. I am in Scan Ward 2 area. I'm a little behind on stuff with Thanksgiving, my birthday on Friday, on Black Friday, shopping day. And I just read Sunday's paper tonight and saw the proclamation in here. So as an advocate for unsheltered and a volunteer for many unsheltered areas in Salem, I'm very thankful for a proclamation, but I'm also very concerned about what's happening now. So Mayor, City Council, I would like to thank all of you for everything you've done on behalf of unsheltered housing, affordable housing, and knowledge of what's going on with our folks in Salem. Because one thing I like to say all the time is they are us. They are our loved ones, family members, neighbors, kids, parents, siblings, could be any of us. And if people have seen the movie No Place to Grow Old recently, seniors are the highest growing number of unsheltered. So, with all the programs, thanks for all that. We have come so far in the last several years, but we still have a long way to go. I saw a video approximately 2 weeks ago of a man yelling at people in the parking lot in Kaiser on River Road, asking some people who appeared to be unsheltered to him what the F they were doing there, and to get the F out of the parking lot, never come back. They were scared, very frightened. They probably didn't call the police, but I did. I talked to the Kaiser police because that guy was very threatening towards those folks he didn't even know. 2 years ago, we had a teenager who killed an unsheltered man in Salem in broad daylight. That teenager got sentenced to 7 years in corrections. A couple months ago, we had an unsheltered man beat by a gang of several kids on Market and 17th Street. Last week, I believe, we had a gang of kids who jumped a homeless man in downtown Salem. So I think we really need to work on how we can be the change and what we can do to kind of work on this hate with the teenagers in Salem towards the unsheltered population. A lot of them are disabled, mentally ill, don't even know why somebody is wanting to beat on them like that. So I think it's something that really hasn't been talked about. We need to talk about it. We need to be aware, work on it. We need to be the change.
Thank you, Lori. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Councilor Nishioka, the consent calendar.
I move for approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Motion by Nishioka, second by Phillips. Councilor, to your motion.
Yes, thank you. The consent calendar consists of 3.1A, the November 25th, 2024 draft City Council minutes. Item 3.3A, claim settlement, authorize the city manager to resolve the matter of Adam Bellows workers' compensation claim in the amount of $65,000. Payment will be made from the city's self-insurance claim fund. Item 3.3B, claim settlement, authorize the city manager to resolve the matter of Marina Baldwin lawsuit in the amount not to exceed $75,000. Payment will be made from the city's self-insurance claim fund. And item 3.3C, providing water service beyond city limits for a property located at 3790 Silverton Road Northeast. And that concludes the consent calendar.
Thank you, Councilor. Is there further discussion? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Hoy? Aye. Counselor Nordike, absent. Counselor Varney?
Aye.
Counselor Stapleton?
Aye.
Counselor Nishioka?
Aye.
Counselor Phillips?
Aye.
Counselor Gwynn?
Aye.
Counselor Gonzalez?
Aye.
Mayor Hoy?
Aye. Motion passes. We have no public hearings this evening. We do have special orders of business. Item 5A, Governance Assessment Implementation Update. Mr. Staley, who's kicking that off? I asked you first.
I am not sure. I apologize.
Well, I do see that we have Annie Rose, who's joined us from Moss Adams online. Annie Rose, are you kicking this off?
Happy to kick this off.
Fantastic.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm Annie Rose Favreau from the Moss Adams team, and I am here tonight to share out some of the recommendations that have come forward from the Boards and Commissions Appointment Committee related to the governance assessment work. I have a quick presentation. Can everyone see that presentation?
Yes, we can see it just fine. Thank you.
Great. So tonight what I'd like to do is give a brief overview of the project to make sure everyone is situated. And then we have 3 different areas of recommendations that came forward. One is related to a potential council policy, one related to potentially consolidating some governance groups, and finally several staff actions. So I'm going to go through each one of these sections, and I can pause at the end of each for discussion, conversation, or keep going depending on what the group would like. So in terms of the project itself, you may remember that the Moss Adams team performed a governance assessment earlier this year, and the focus of that review was looking at the city charter, as well as governance groups, meaning the boards, commissions, committees that support the work of the city, and neighborhood associations. And we were looking at these different areas to identify opportunities to improve the efficiency, the effectiveness, and equity and relevance within each of these areas. The report made recommendations, and we are now in the implementation phase. For that, we have broken implementation into 3 separate streams. The first stream of work is related to governance groups, specifically boards and commissions, and some of the related recommendations there. That is what we are going to be discussing tonight. We've been working with the Boards and Commissions Appointment Committee, which I'm going to call the BCAC moving forward. And what I'm bringing forward tonight is the recommendations from that group for consideration and discussion. In the future, we will also be bringing forward work related to neighborhood associations and the city charter that will be taking place in 2025.
Annie Rose, somehow we lost your audio. You're talking, but we can't hear you. There you go.
Let me try. Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Thank you so much. Did I lose you on this slide or should I go back one?
Just this slide, I think.
Great. So here, the first area of recommendation was related to the idea of developing a council policy related to boards and commissions that would focus in 3 areas: annual reporting and work plans, counselor liaison assignments, and finally governance group reviews. So I'm going to go through those areas in a bit more detail and then pause. The first recommendation from the BCAC is to establish a policy that requires annual reports from all boards and commissions to City Council and requires annual work plans from some governance groups, although not all. So for example, groups that focus primarily on responsive work, like the Civil Service Commission, would not necessarily need to provide a work.
Annie Rose, we lost you again. It looks like you're frozen. Now we've lost your audio. I see you talking, but I don't hear you talking. Nope, still can't hear you. Nope.
How about now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm thinking it might be my internet connection, so I'm going to do one thing to see if I can change that out quickly and see if that will improve my audio. Let me just...
We will read the slide while you are adjusting your internet.
Thank you for your flexibility.
If you would like, we do have Mr. Atchison is available to pinch hit for you and do the presentation on the slides if that would be helpful. Yeah, I can't blame her. She's not interested in that.
All right. How about now?
Well, we are hearing you. I don't know if you heard me, but I did suggest we have Mr. Atchison here in the room if you would like him to pinch hit for you on the audio.
Oh, fantastic. Well, let's see if this one works, and if it doesn't, I will take you up on that.
Great.
All right. So the idea here is that we want to formalize. We know that often boards and commissions will make reports to City Council, but we want to formalize that and make that a clear expectation for all groups, as well as recognizing that it's helpful for City Council to receive work plans from groups that intend on accomplishing significant proactive work throughout the year. And so as part of the policy, we would also include the framework of what type of information would be shared by each group as part of that annual report. So the next piece within this potential new council policy would be related to counselor liaison assignments. So the idea, we know that right now there are some counselor liaisons, but this has not been formalized. So this policy would describe a few different things. First and foremost, it would talk about what the purpose of a counselor liaison role is. It would describe the appointment process, how that would actually happen, as well as the selection criteria. And so this would include things like the complexity of issues. So for example, if a governance group is dealing with a highly complex topic or one that will require policy changes to effectively support the work, they may benefit from a counselor liaison. If the scope or the impact on the community is very broad, again, that may benefit from a counselor liaison. We'd also want to make sure that that any groups that were strongly aligned with current council priorities would have a counselor liaison there to ensure that there's alignment between the work that is happening. But finally, we would also want to have on here a recognition that counselor liaisons are not guaranteed. So this would be based on a counselor or a council member volunteering to serve as a liaison. And if no one would volunteer for that role, the group would not necessarily receive a liaison. So those are the three areas that were discussed as part of the, those were the first two areas. The last area is the governance group review framework. So the idea here is that the policy would set a standard for regular review of governance groups. We know that these groups require a significant amount of city resources to maintain. They're a very, very critical way of bringing community members into this work. And so we want to make sure that this is a really effective use of everybody's time. So this review process would be as part of the annual reporting process as groups are sharing out what they have accomplished over the past year. This would be a natural point in time for City Council or the BCAC to consider ideas for potentially consolidating groups. For example, if you see that multiple groups are sharing similar purposes or have some type of redundancy, this could be an opportunity to say, let's bring those groups together. This could be a time to consider sunsetting groups if the group is not fulfilling a high priority need for the community, or if they're, for example, regularly failing to meet quorum. Those could be indicators that it might be time to close out that work. Finally, this would also be a time to consider adding additional groups. If there's a high need where there's no other group fulfilling that purpose, if it's well aligned with city priorities, and if the city has sufficient staff to effectively support the group, that would be an opportunity to potentially add a new group as well. So those three items taken together would be what would go into this proposed council policy. And I'm going to pause here if you would like for questions or discussion, or I can keep rolling. What is your preference?
Do we have questions, or are people ready to make comments, or would you like to hear the rest of it first? Keep going. They're saying keep going.
Great. All right. Well, then the next piece that I want to bring forward is the BCAC recommendation to potentially combine the urban renewal advisory boards into one group. Currently, the city has three groups: the Riverfront Downtown URA Board, the Northgate URA Board, and the West Salem URA Board. And the idea here is that there are benefits from having a group that would have, a single group that would bring that representation across the city. These three boards all advise the Urban Renewal Agency Board regarding things like conservation and rehabilitation and redevelopment matters for different areas of the city. So although each of these groups do require some specialized time and support, there's certainly overlap in the work that they do on certain development projects, and decisions from one group often can impact other groups. So staff surveyed when we spoke with staff on this topic. They also mentioned that these groups can be very difficult to recruit for, to make sure that we have enough people in each one of these groups. And it would be a more effective potential use of staff time if we brought those groups together. And finally, it could potentially produce more continuity for the group as urban renewal areas close and open. So the recommendation here would be to bring these three groups together. Potential structure for a combined group would include transition members from each of the three current groups. So bringing in 9 members total from the current groups that are functioning today, as well as 4 at-large members that would represent citywide, and that would be members, residents outside of the current URA boundaries. In addition, as they move forward, as the current URAs are closed and no longer have board representation, those positions could transition to at-large members, and likewise, at-large positions could be converted to specific URA as future new URAs open up. So that is the second recommendation here. And then the third area that I wanted to share tonight was the proposed staff actions. There's 2 areas here. The first is to implement standardized bylaws. So each one of the boards and commissions right now have bylaws or some version of that, but they are not standardized, and there's a wide variation across all of the groups. So this would just be making sure we have a standard bylaw template that is used by every group. It could be adjusted, but it would have a baseline minimum of the pieces that you see up on this slide here in terms of the framework where language would be provided to each of the groups. This would just ensure continuity and consistency across the groups and make it easier for members of the public to understand what each group does. And then the last piece would be, the last recommendation would be to direct staff to update the application materials and process. We received quite a lot of feedback as part of the assessment around the application process and some of the struggles with that. And so this would be a recommendation to update the application to collect additional information, things like your ward, how you're connected to Salem, as well as demographic information like age, gender, race, language spoken at home. And finally, we also recommend some improved form features. So the actual application itself, the idea here is that we could limit applicants to apply for one group per application, and in that way they could really make sure that they have a tailored application for that specific group, as well as giving them the opportunity to link and reference documents, which can't be done currently. So those would be some of the more tactical pieces here. So with that, those are all of the pieces that I wanted to bring forward. In terms of next steps after today, as I mentioned before, there would be additional items brought to City Council in early 2025 related to governance group eligibility requirements, neighborhood associations, and of course the city charter. So I'm happy to go back to any of those slides, but for now I can stop here.
Thank you, Annie Rose. Questions or comments on these slides? Councilor Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. Standardized bylaws, I'm in agreement with that. But on the urban renewal, I have a question. Are other cities that have different urban renewal advisory groups or committees, have they ever been joined like that in that sense? That's one thing I'm not sure if, how that looks like, who's done it. Because I know several years ago, it worries me a little bit only because one of the first interactions I really had with the city was early in 2010, 12, somewhere in there. A community member, I think was on the North Gateway, North Portland Road, urban renewal area, came to us and he was looking for letters of support because somehow the city or another urban renewal area wanted to take some of the money from ours and take it somewhere else. So I had to write a letter saying that, it needs to stay within. So that's one thing that worries me is that, these voices from these, even though I'm sure it is hard to fill these groups, I'm not sure if that's the one we should just all join together. I'm just not sure, because it's just gonna lead to one area town getting more participation and having a stronger voice than the other. I mean, it's just what ends up happening. So that's what concerns me a little bit.
There may be members of staff who can speak to this as well, but from my perspective, that is a structure that we have seen, with the caveat that we'd always want to make sure that there were select and dedicated positions within that group that would still be representing your specific geographic region as well. And so that's one of the ways to ensure that balance that you're speaking to, is that you still want those dedicated roles that are for the specific urban renewal areas, even if the group is combined.
Thank you, Annie Rose. And I see that Ms. Rutherford has her microphone on. I think she has some thoughts for us.
Sure. Kristen Rutherford, Director of Community Planning and Development. So every community in the state that uses urban renewal has their own structure for how they manage it, and many of them do not have advisory boards like we do. So they have the governing board, which is the city council or a similar board, and then some do have advisory boards that feed up to that board. Many don't. It kind of depends on the size of the community, the number of urban renewal areas. So it's all of that is kind of under local control. The proposed structure that Annie Rose was speaking about would retain, for the life of the 3 urban renewal areas that do have advisory boards, representation from that urban renewal area. As we move forward in time, we're looking at closing the North Gateway Urban Renewal Area in a couple more years. That board would dissolve. As then we're looking at creating new urban renewal areas, and there would be new positions that would be available for people from that area so that they would have representation.
And just in terms of just being a member of that committee that considered all of these things, and the committee that makes these appointments, you know, we spend a lot of time on that process, and I know the staff liaisons spend even more time than we do on recruitment, on screening, trying to make sure that we have people in the right spot, and we're trying to be as efficient as possible, but yet maintain that geographic representation. So this was kind of the proposal that came up. So, additional questions or comments? Councillor Stapleton.
Thank you for all of this work, Annie Rose. There was one area on the proposed application framework that I was wondering if we could add or think about adding in this conversation. What I don't see is whether or not they own or rent here in the city. And I know that there is a really big disparity. A lot of folks who serve on our boards and commissions typically own their homes versus folks who are renters. And I know that we are always trying really hard to get folks who are renters to join in some of these boards and commissions. And I'm wondering if that would be a way that we could help elevate that portion of the population and try and get a more balanced approach there. I would be interested in Annie Rose's comments, but also my fellow councilors.
Annie Rose, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that would be within the spirit of the other information that is gathered. And I know that there was a large discussion about lived experience that would be relevant to specific groups that you would be applying for. And I can certainly imagine that falling under that category as well, depending on the specific governance group.
Any other comments or feedback for Councillor Stapleton's thought? Councillor Gonzalez.
It's a great idea. One of the things that's true, though, is usually it's when someone feels stable and sees that this is a long-term investment in their neighborhood is when they invest in homes. So it's hard for someone that's renting that's probably not thinking about it. So I think it'd be great to have it as an option. I think we'll keep having that challenge. But I know when I was, when in my campaign, I would go to apartment complexes and have them put my sign in their window, and not just the yard. I'd actually, so I know what you're after, and I'd be 100% for it too. It's just there's that challenge. It's just they're just not yet invested. But as the rate of home ownership drops, I think there's people that are invested that are renting more and more.
Councillor Gwynn.
Back to the urban renewal areas, I was just curious if the current boards know about this and how they feel about combining the 3.
I think Ms. Rutherford will take that one, Annie Rose.
We've not yet had those conversations or presentation with any of the advisory boards.
Councillor Phillips.
My question is basically taking off where Councilor Gonzalez started, with the concern that there was an attempt to use money for a different urban renewal district, borrowing from the district that they weren't in. Is this proposed structure, does it have a way for representatives from that geographic area to veto it, or how would that situation work?
That situation's not allowed by law.
Okay.
Other discussion? Councillor Varney.
Thank you very much. First of all, on the urban renewal area one, my question is, what is the current process for public input? And then how would this change moving forward if we consolidated?
So out of all of our urban renewal areas, out of the 8, we have only 3 urban renewal areas that have advisory boards. Okay? For the 3 that have advisory boards, they either have monthly, every 2 months, or quarterly meetings, depending on availability and quorum. And each of those meetings has an opportunity for public testimony, input, much like any of our bodies. That would continue to be the case. If we consolidated, we would still have opportunities for public input at those meetings. So when we typically see public input, it is often during the budget process, or the other time that we will see public input is if we've got somebody with a development that may be wanting to apply for a grant. Occasionally they will come forward and present to the advisory board so that they're familiar with what the project is and what the request is.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. My other comment is on, what do I want to say here? I like the idea of standardizing things and coming up with bylaws and coming up with the structure, but I look at how much time staff takes, for instance, on the Salem, on the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, working on work plans, annual reports, et cetera. And I guess my concern is more, I don't want to add more work onto staff with these changes to these boards and commissions. I mean, that's just something I'm kind of floating out there. I want us to be really careful that we're not adding to that workload. That makes sense. Okay.
Thank you. I think that's something that we talked about during our process, and that's not, we were trying to be cognizant of that as well. We're trying to find the balance between having a quality relationship between those boards and the council, and accountability and those sorts of things, so we're actually understanding what they're up to. Some are really good about doing the annual report. They come to council, they do a presentation, and some not so much. So, but we also recognize that there are some that just, it wouldn't be appropriate because all their, you know, their whole role is really just responding to things that are put before them. They're not doing proactive work. And so we tried to, that's in some of the language that I think that you saw there, you saw that recognition. So we were sensitive to that as well. And in fact, one of the whole purposes of all of this is to make staff time more efficient, because we recognize that it's a problem. You know, we need to be more efficient with staff time. So, Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you, Mayor Hoy. Yes, the other thing that we discussed is that we would be making appointments to certain committees, but the reality is we didn't always hear from these committees or know what their work plans were or what they were doing. And we want to, again, make sure that staff time is being well utilized and that we're aware of what they're working on or not working on, or if they're not having meetings because they can't meet a quorum. It's more to keep in touch and make sure that whatever that committee is responsible for is being implemented, and they just keep us informed. That was one of the points I made, at least.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'm thinking, is reporting annually enough? For one question. And then the other one is, as the liaison for the Parks Board, it's been a little unclear as to what my role really is, so I appreciate this. You know, I don't know if there needs to be a particular, I don't know, something added to an agenda item or something for reports from counselors that are liaisons or something like that in the future. I don't know if that was discussed. But anyway, I appreciate the work going into this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Gonzalez, did I see your hand? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm conscious of staff time because that's the reality of the resources the city has, you know, but in this case, these are volunteers, you know, and sometimes the type of, whatever the work plan, the purpose of that committee, the work in front of it is what will attract attendance, you know, so sometimes it's not, I don't blame the people for not showing up, it's because the purpose of that meeting is probably not, it's not useful. You know, so that's when people don't show up, when they feel their voice isn't heard or it doesn't matter. That's what I do. That's me. That's me also, so I don't blame them. And in this case, especially with the urban renewal groups, I'd want to hear from them. I just assumed that this had already gone through with them, and we heard their voices. And so to me, I'd really want to hear what they say, at least get their feedback, because they're volunteers that have spent time trying to help the city, which reduces staff time. Volunteers reduce staff time, so I value their time.
Further discussion, Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you. So I will give some thoughts on the reports, like the parks brings the report, and it's generally the chair. So a lot of that work would be done collectively by the group, and again, help facilitate the staff time. So regarding the liaisons, I think that Annie Rose might have some specific information, but oftentimes it's more, when I serve as a liaison, I go and I listen. And I'm not sitting at the table. I'm not, I'm not voting on anything. It's more listening. And in fact, if something comes up that I go, oh, maybe the counselors need to know about this. So it's kind of being that avenue of communication if needed. And I think that each committee would be uniquely different, that with the liaison there, that could be an ebb and flow based on what that committee or advisory group was doing. So I'm not sure if there's specific things that were being recommended, but I understood it that the liaison is more not to be directly involved, but to be present if needed.
Yeah, I started this kind of mess with the liaisons. I think you two are the only two liaisons that we have, and I just did it. I did it because you had been on, Councilor Varney had been on the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, and then you got elected directly onto council, and I didn't want to lose that experience and that time and everything in that relationship. I thought this would be a great way to take advantage of that, and plus I was feeling a big gap between City Council and the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, and I felt like this would be a great way to sort of bridge that gap. And then Councilor Nishioka with the Airport Advisory Committee and Dab, I wanted to have that connection with the City Council, but yet not appoint members to their group, but just be that kind of conduit between the two. So that was my thought on why I started that. Yeah, Councilor Varney.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And the council liaison is actually also something that the Parks Board requested.
Yeah.
And I go, as you said, I'm not a voting member or anything. I go and attend, and occasionally board members will have questions about things occurring at council that impact them and some of the discussions they're having. So there's definitely, it's a two-way conversation.
For sure.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Phillips.
Thank you for the dialogue and the kind of helping us understand what it's like to actually do that position as the liaison. I guess my question is, I have not done it, and my time's coming to an end shortly. But is it similar to like your neighborhood association? Like, is it because you're not a voting member, but you're there to kind of, help raise things to the level of staff leadership attention when they come up?
For me, I think it varies in the sense that I can attend a meeting and not say a word. Whereas a neighborhood association, I'm on the agenda. So I would say that if my presence at a board or commission meeting or an advisory group, if they had questions, I would be there and I could answer them. And even recently, I was at one where they were struggling with figuring out how to do the process of a motion. And so I could help facilitate that. So it's sort of more hearing what they're doing and providing input if needed, or answering questions, or bringing forth, as Councilor Varney said, something that they want to know what's happening in council. And I certainly would do that if I was asked.
Councilor Stapleton.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add to this point in the conversation. I served as a liaison for the Equity Roundtable, which is a little bit different than a board or commission, and I was literally just participating with them in whatever it was that staff were presenting to them, and I was part of the discussions at the roundtable. And I think for them, it really helped them feel validated in what they were doing to have a member of council there and present and participating. So I think that the council liaison serves a multitude of purposes, and I think that you're right. I think all of us are pointing out each one seems to be very unique to the situation.
Councilor Hoy.
Thank you. Just a quick question. In the appendix, the two asterisks always stand out to me. Is that, why are those marked with an asterisk? The Airport Advisory and the Salem Parks and Recreation Advisory Boards?
I believe those are the groups that currently have liaisons on them.
Yeah.
Okay, so the group then that Councilor Stapleton just mentioned is not on this list. It's a different kind of group.
Yeah, correct.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Annie Rose? Okay. Annie Rose, did you have anything further for us on it?
I did not.
I think we are ready for a motion then, potentially. Councilor Nishioka.
Yes. I move to adopt the recommendations contained in this report to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of the city governance groups.
Second.
Motion by Nishioka, second by Phillips. Councilor, do you have anything further on your motion? Microphone, please.
Sorry, thought it was on. I don't have anything further.
Is there further discussion? Councilor, either 5 or 6. You guys decide.
Thank you.
Councilor
I mean,
Gonzalez.
the only reason I want to vote against it just because the urban renewal advisory groups were not approached ahead of time. That's the only reason.
Councilor Hoy, did you have something?
That's what I was going to say.
Okay. Councilor Gwynn.
And same, my concern is, I would have been in favor of this if we knew how these, the urban renewal agency boards felt about it, so.
Okay.
So I can't be in favor of it.
Great.
Thank you.
Councilor Varney.
Thank you. So you mentioned that they hadn't been contacted yet. If this were to move forward, what's the process that you're planning?
So we would absolutely be speaking with them. So one of the challenges sometimes in situations like this, and we've also run into this with property acquisition, where we come to council to get direction, and council asks, have we talked with the property owners yet, right? So there's kind of this, can be a circle where we don't want to get out ahead of council contacting and having a conversation with an affected party if we don't know that's the direction that council wants to take. So we would absolutely be having the conversation with the advisory boards, knowing that this is the direction that council would want to take.
Councilor Phillips.
I guess my question is anyone that staff could help me understand what does this commit us to, and what opportunity for improvement and change could happen along the process?
Dan, do you want to handle that one?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I mean, we're adopting the recommendations contained in the report. That's the motion. But what does that commit us to in terms of not having heard from the the urban renewal boards that we're talking about that seem to be a point of concern from some of our colleagues? Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Basically, the advisory boards are created through resolution for the most part. So we would be bringing a resolution back to council to combine them. I believe there would probably need to be a code amendment to correct some language in different chapters as well. So council would have an opportunity to actually make the actual decision to combine them.
So this is a framework for that work, but not the actual creating the consolidation.
If it helps the councilors who have concern about not reaching out to the boards, obviously that process would occur before the resolutions would be brought to council.
I appreciate that. I mean, I think I've heard a couple of my colleagues at points say that, is the cake baked? Is the cake gonna be baked? And I'm trying to understand at what level of baked the cake is. So it's not fully baked, but it's gonna come back at a future point for a future council.
But it's going in the oven.
But I don't know.
We've decided we want cake.
Yes, we've decided this, generally speaking, we might want cake. Okay.
Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you. So I think, too, we need to help explain that it is not always easy to get enough people to serve on these urban renewal advisory boards. And that was part of our discussion in looking at combining them, because the work is still the same, or pretty much the same. It's just that there's 3 of them versus 1 that could do it. And it will take some time, because we've recently appointed people, and it would take time for this whole thing to happen. So it's not like it's going to be tomorrow they're not on the board anymore, or on the advisory group, and then all of a sudden, a couple of them might be and some might not. It would be a process. And I think that, I would think that some of those members would actually be glad, because it would consolidate, they would have all of the budgets that they would be reviewing, not the specific one where maybe they're having trouble even having a quorum.
Councillor Stapleton? Did I see your hand?
Not yet, but you will in a moment.
Councillor Phillips?
Yeah, I guess I think I understand the three main, policy positions that we're going to do, and then the efficiency with the bringing together the urban renewal area boards. I guess my question based on that I'm sorry to staff, I don't know this off the top of my head. Is that like saving us staff time? Does it have a budgetary impact? I mean, I know that people want us to be efficient with the limited and constrained resources we have. Is there a benefit there?
There is a benefit time from the staffing perspective, right? So for each of those urban renewal areas that have advisory boards, those boards have a staff liaison, and they also have administrative support to run it much like this meeting, right? Where you're putting together agendas, you're publishing the agendas, you're taking the minutes, you're pushing it out on YouTube. So all of those same actions have to happen for each urban renewal area. Now, North Gateway, they don't typically meet on a monthly basis. They don't have enough work to keep them busy on a monthly basis. West Salem does tend to meet on a monthly basis, but there's also a challenge with the filling agendas, right? So a lot of those agendas are more educational about other things that are happening in the city, not just urban renewal matters.
Councillor Stapleton?
Sorry.
Yeah.
My follow-up, I guess, is it's a good reminder that when it comes to the urban renewal, would there be any impact on the general fund? That's my question.
Not to the general fund.
So it's, and the funding of the urban renewal districts is less like, it's the general fund where I feel that we have a problem and the urban renewal is more okay.
That's correct. So yes, financially, it would not be a substantial cost savings to the general fund at all.
Right. Councillor Stapleton, were you next up again?
Thank you. I move that the council direct staff to move forward with the staff recommendations except the urban renewal section, tabling that until staff can gain feedback from the URA boards.
Second.
Motion by Stapleton, second by Phillips. Is there further discussion? Councillor Hoy.
Just one question. How many volunteers are we talking about on these three boards?
It ranges from 9 to 12, depending on vacancies.
Per board or total?
Per board.
Per board. Mm-hmm. So it's a few people to reach out to.
Yeah, so what we would do is schedule it to show up at the next few meetings and put it on an agenda, I think, so that they could have a conversation at the board meeting.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Further discussion. Councillor Varney.
I just wanted to mention, thank you for asking Councillor Hoy about that, because they're at the West Salem Redevelopment Advisory Board meetings, one of the, although there may not be many agenda topics, I really appreciate the updates from the volunteers that are there on what's going on in the urban renewal area. Anyone who wants to attend their meeting, it's 7:30 this Wednesday, 7:30 in the morning. Just letting you know. Thanks.
Anything further? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Councillor Nordyke, absent. Councillor Varney?
Aye.
Councillor Stapleton?
Aye.
Councillor Nishioka?
Aye.
Councillor Phillips?
Aye.
Councillor Gwynn?
Aye.
Councillor Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councillor Hoy?
Aye.
Mayor Hoy?
Aye. Motion passes.
That would be considered a substitute motion, so you don't need to go back to the original motion.
Thank you. So I was just trying to make sure we disposed of them all. Great. Thank you, folks. Thank you, Annie Rose, for your taking us through that. We appreciate your time. Whatever you did to your internet connection worked. All right. We are now on to information reports. Does anybody have anything on 6A? And that's our only information. I'm sorry, 6B. Anything on 6B? There's a beautiful color handout at your desk if you would like to refer to it. I'm not seeing any hands. Okay. We have no ordinances. We have no, do we have anybody signed up under number 8? We do not have anybody signed up under number 8. At 6:53, Counselor Stapleton is raising her hand.
I would just like to say thank you to staff for creating this amazing report. Every year, it is fantastic to go through it, see the progress that we are making on so many different fronts, see where the community has really poured their time and attention and focused this council and therefore city staff on the issues that are important to them. And I would just encourage every single resident out there to get a copy of this and read it. It's important to know what's happening in your city hall. And so thank you to staff for pulling it together, and thanks for all of you for doing all the great work.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Varney.
Excellent point. No, I really appreciate it. It's a great reference document. Is there a place where folks can pick one up?
One moment, please. We have Courtney Knox-Bush approaching the lectern.
Hello, everyone. Courtney Knox-Bush. I work in the Mayor and City Manager's office, and this report is online. And if you went to the government link, Shaping Salem's Future, and then to the strategic plan, you could see all of the reports since, I think, 2017 are all on there, and all of the strategic plan and the policy agenda, all of those things are all there. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Anything else? It really is beautiful. It really is. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Can we get you to